you
But
know,
that's when everybody's afraid that that's when you come into the market, and it's always it's a simple motto: buy low, sell high.
it's a simple
But
rule.
it's funny that nobody applies it, even I. It's just psychological. It's a human nature that when things are doom and gloomy, you just pull back.
Yeah.
But it's that's when you make I shouldn't say the word killings, but that's when you make the killings.
Yeah. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Between Plays Stock Market Strategies. And with us today, we have Monsieur Eric Lemieux, Mr. Eric Lemieux. How are you doing today, Eric?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much, Albert.
So, Eric, I mean, naturally, I had taken a little bit of a break from November to January because of the fact that, it was vacations, Christmas, there's some stuff happened to family, but the market seemed to like have tanked a little bit in the mining industry. Started early in 2023, but around November and December, it hurt. It really hurt. Uh, and this is all in the critical mineral sector. It's in lithium and these commodities that are so important for the future. And I don't understand what it is that's really going on out there. Do you have a little bit of a take on that?
A little bit, Albert. I mean, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now, and obviously, commodity sector competes with other parts of the economy. And like it or not, we talk about I guess they call it the famous seven or whatever it is in terms of the technology and the cryptocurrency, and that obviously takes part of the speculative aspect of what we have in the junior mining industry. We sort of lost that stellar reputation that we had, for better or for worse. I think since 2012, I think in 13, there's been this sort of um, floor that has sort of given up on us, and it's been, mind you, we've had a little ups and downs since that. But I mean, generally, the last decade, I think, is been tough for the commodity side of things, even though economically and you can sort of technically explain that we still need these different commodities. There is a sort of a general letdown of interest in the speculative junior market. And I think what compound that in part also is just that, the ones who were producing didn't necessarily have stellar results. Yes, there was a kit post COVID, but it was short term based. And I would say since the summer, you could see it in the fall. There was just gloom after gloom that just effectively accumulated. I thought it was going to end by December of 2023, but I think it still lingered on until recently. And we'll have to see. I mean, obviously, the price of gold that's shot up
Yes.
in part is helping a little bit, but I think we're rolling on sort of on the bottom. But I understand the frustration where population, world population is increasing. Um, Nations want to modernize, and if you do that, you need the blocks, the building blocks, and the building blocks are, I call them base metals. I feel comfortable to talk base metals. I know now there's all this sort of talk about the critical metals, and some are, yes, critical, but for me, nickel remains a base metal. And when I say base, it's nothing negative about it. To the contrary, I see something as a base, as a foundation. Any foundation of an economy has to be based, excuse me the pun, based on base metals. And
Yes.
so, I'm optimistic in the medium to long term, because just the population growth, the requirement to just keep our infrastructure that we actually have, and if we want to increase, improve, we're going to need that. And so maybe to swing onto the more critical metals aspect of stuff. What I see also is that, yes, effectively rare earths. You can see now there's a sort of a realization that we're going to need some, and the fact that a lot of stuff comes from China, um, are bought by the Chinese. I mean, it's produced all over the world, but our transport to China, where they have the concentrators, the refineries, and they finish the product, and then after that, they send it out to the rest of the world. Um, I think people are realizing that the security of supply is very important, and we're going to have to be maybe more cognizant of trying to produce more locally. It's going to be better for the environment, that's for sure. I always like telling people that we live on the same planet, and I can do my best for the environment, but if my neighbor is not doing something at all, it doesn't help. And I'm putting this on a little scale, but put it on the world scale. I kind of cringe sometimes when I see that, China is permitted to do a lot of stuff that I don't think are correct, and we sort of swipe that. And I see the Canadian government with, its strong regime of on the green economy, but is very silent on what goes on in the other parts of the world. And sometimes we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of our development, and assuring that our society is progressing, and able to provide the minimum of wages, and commodities, and the bricks and stones of our foundation.
Absolutely. And that's like a big catch 22, isn't it? I mean, because then you have, let's, human rights aspect. Then you have the, let's go green aspect. And then you have the not in my backyard NIMBY aspect, right? So it's a catch 22, because when you look at it, like, you put this on a small stage of like, yeah, I can do whatever I want, but my neighbor, I mean, if they're not, doing anything and the other one's not doing anything, like, we got a little bit of a problem here. If I'm one and there's like three or four not doing anything, because you're sort of outnumbered, right? So the percentages work against you. And naturally, on the grand scale of things, I mean, if you look at certain things like what cobalt that we had seen in the past, or, you know, I always like to reference Battery Day, when the investors told Elon Musk, like, listen, you got to clean up your act, because we're not going to, you know, we're not going to be able to stay shareholders in the company if you don't clean this stuff out, because we're against what's happening in these other countries for human rights violations, children and stuff working in these, open
Well,
land
it's
pits. And
it's a whole chain, and you have to
yeah,
be cognizant that if the final product is to improve the greening of the world, well, you have to make sure that the beginning is sound and correct. And effectively, the reality is that, it, commodities are where they are; they're fixed in location, and
yeah,
you can't make a mine outside in an area that
that's
is
right, that's right.
in an industrial
Yes,
zoned area, because that's Mother Nature hides her jewels. And I always said, an ore deposit is fixed in size, and it's fixed in location. And so this realization that, we were able to accept that stuff is produced in other parts of the world with substandards and not, our parameters, and are shipped to China. And I always tell people also, when you transfer um, material commodities to the factories, well, there is a cost. There's environmental cost that obviously, we put in big boats, and it comes out that, it's economic to do it. But you just wonder about, what is the exact balance of the carbon footprint of
yeah,
this sort of exercise. And I think there's a realization since COVID that we got to be more careful, and maybe it's to our advantage to produce more locally. So hopefully, we're going to start to realize that, and that the NIMBY crowd, I should say, we realize that yes, effectively, we're better to accept things being done closer to home with our parameters. And I think we can do a very good job in that sense. And then it will develop our economies better. Will provide our society with good wages, good transformation, and hopefully I think, like I said earlier on, I'm optimistic for the medium term and long term.
yes, yes. And when it comes to base metals, and you're looking at certain commodities, like we're talking about, you had, touched upon gold. I'm just really curious. What was the highest that we've been at recently? I think it was over 2,200. Did we hit that point? And it came back down, or is it still 2,100 and something, I believe, that
Well,
we've hit?
I think yesterday or 2 days ago it did reach
Taking a fast,
2,280.
take a
Um,
fast look over here. I'm just really curious.
I say
They,
200. It's 2,180. I stand to be corrected
yeah,
in that
that's right.
sense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's interesting. I mean, yeah, well, we actually went 2,193.10 is the highest within the last month. That's crazy. So, I mean, look, we're now going, looking to go to 2,200 here. We're really close. And
Yeah,
why
but
do you
I
believe
use
this
the
is?
2,175. I think,
Yeah,
if we gravitate and stay around that number, Hopefully, the ones who are producing are able to minimize costs. And that's just, I'm sort of optimistic because I think what happened is that when the price of gold did go up, unfortunately, last 4 years, costs went up too. So the margin wasn't really there.
Yeah,
But right now, I think there is sort of this stability right now in terms of the cost curve, in terms of all the entrants and extrants
that's so
with
interesting.
mining operations. So I think right now, I think for the future, the gold producers will have higher margins. I think that will create again more momentum for our
That's
industry, and
right.
that eventually will percolate down to the juniors.
Oh, that's going to be very positive and very good for the industry.
Yeah,
What I
but then again,
find,
I'm cognizant that it's ups and downs, and gold is higher up. It could I don't foresee it going down, but there could be some little amplitudes here and there.
yeah,
But we saw it with the lithium. I mean, last year at this date, or just 2 months before January 2023, we were very high, and you could see that there was a lot of enthusiasm.
yes,
And like I told you earlier on, what goes up very quickly and
yes,
come back down. But I think this is a healthy pullback. And I tell people that, I still think effectively that the lithium story is one that's solid enough to say that it's a worthwhile mineral commodity,
yeah,
and there will be adjustments. But I always tell people that it is an industrial minerals, and so you have to see that there's different things that you have to take into account. And but having said that, it's always the question of making sure you've got good quality, a good size, and a
yes,
good team behind it.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess on that point, I know that Brunswick Exploration, Killian Charles was at Fasken Breakfast the other day. Uh, I was going ahead there, but then something happened in the family. But
Fair enough. I mean, I think I sent you the invite,
yeah,
and you told me you would be there, and I didn't see
yes,
you. It was yesterday in Montreal. Maybe just a parenthesis. It's called the déjeuner minier, the mining breakfast. And previously, in the other years, it was for the last, I think, 15 years, it was the luncheons. It was the mining luncheons that the Quebec Inc. with some law firms and then some accounting firms sort of supported. But it was at Price Waterhouse main offices in Montreal. And yes, Killian did an excellent presentation. Like I told you, he did it sort of in two segments. First segment in English, he really went over the lithium industry, put things into proper context. And then the second one, he talked in French and got into the specifics of Brunswick exploration.
yeah. And was there any takeaways that you thought was really interesting from like that whole breakfast conversation in
For
Killian's
sure,
speech?
for sure. I mean, Killian is an excellent presenter. On the first segment, I think he did a really good um, summary of what was going on and justified why I think he's optimistic for the lithium infrastructure. Um, what I found interesting, and I think we were talking about this before we got into a recording over here, but what goes up very quickly will attract a lot of different players.
Yes,
And I mentioned that we saw that in terms of lithium producers, there was some spodumene producers, I should say, that were able to, because of proximity to China, Australia in particular, were able to directly ship their spodumene without even concentrating, or very little bit concentrating in terms of quality to China, and that was just fed into the meat grinder, if you want.
yes,
And so this just sort of explained that there was a lot of intake, and it just created this demand of the lithium, and that just shut up the price. But that wasn't sustainable.
yeah,
So I think the pullback that we've seen in the last year and a half, or I should say the last 6 7 months,
yes,
is health, and I think it just permits to reset the bar, and it's the better deposits that will be brought ahead.
yeah,
Obviously, like any industrial minerals, there can be some technological change that 1 or 2 years we might say, well, the hard rocks don't necessarily cut it off anymore because it might come from the brines, but who knows? And if you go
yeah.
with that sort of perspective that you're always hesitant, you'll get nothing done.
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, for investors, there's always risk in any commodity you're putting your money in. So technology does change along the way. But I mean, if you're thinking, just it's not about really thinking that way. It's more about always your research, like we say here. Okay, this is our motto: research, prepare, plan, execute. But you have to start back at the research. You're always reviewing not only your companies, but you're reviewing the technology, the reason why you got into it, and all that kind of stuff. Because naturally, in the stock market and any company, whether it's the industry of mining, whether it's technology, whether it's I don't know, aviation industry, things change, and that the stock market is always fluctuating up and down. So basically, you're talking about the share price. Yeah, there was a pullback, um, and the thing is that it seemed to be a very healthy one because the price is at a great level. It's not like as if the price is gone down to an unhealthy level where you could just say, "Oh my God, I think that you're right in the way you put it." It went up because you have all different types of players. The lithium was hot. It gets in. It shot up pretty much with the lithium commodities, and you know it, when it came back down, people didn't know where it was gonna go. I think we had hit like 35, and it just bounced right back off of that, went right up to 51, and then now it's at a very stable area. In my opinion, I mean, we start hitting anything, I really don't think that it's staying at these prices. I mean, just for an example, we'll take PMET. I mean, what PMET went back up to like $9 and something cents, and it had come down. So it's all about, and this is what my takeaway is, and I think that this is also from the breakfast that you guys had. Lifestyle companies versus what you touched upon, a company that's got management behind them, putting money into the ground.
Well, dynamic management, and getting back to what sort of Killian explained was the whole history of Brunswick, and it's interesting that they really had focus on exploration, and they've done, if I'm not mistaken, I would say almost every province in Canada. I mean, they started off in New Brunswick because New Brunswick, Brunswick exploration. Well, I think the New Brunswick was something de facto, and they started off in gold, and then morphed a little bit into the nickel and copper. And I remember they had a project in the Mauricie area, the Lac Edouard mine, the old nickel copper mine. And then they saw with Robert Wares, they saw the value proposition of being early on the lithium
Yes.
um, sector stage, and they generated projects. And kudos for them as a strong team that's able to be ahead of the curve and lead the parade. I think I'm really comfortable to say that Brunswick was one of the leaders of the parade. And they went off to Atlantic Canada. They generated stuff in Quebec, more into the Pontiac area,
Yes.
southern part of the Abitibi, then stuff in the James Bay. They've got stuff in Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. The long story short is that they've really built a way of a strong team and a way of exploring that they're able to rather quickly say, does this make sense or does it not make sense? And I think that's testament of a very dynamic team that's able to pull the strings correctly and advance stuff. And I think that's to me, in terms of as a potential investor, that gives a good foundation to the stock because you're open to opportunities. And I think Brunswick, in that case, the pullback is a healthy one in that regards. But I think we're much closer to bottom than a frothy top. That's for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is that um I this is a big thing now that's been going around where people do talk about where do I put my money, um and lifestyle companies versus the real deal. And when I say the real deal versus lifestyle, is money going into the ground. I'm talking about as an investor, right? I'm not talking about like uh, you know companies with the intention of doing stuff along the way, but like as an investor, you want to find what is current, right? And you do also want to find something a little bit early that you can gauge, is this going to happen with this company? So there's this big thing now. I think that when the lithium pulled back, November happened, December, the mining industry started to take this big hit. a lot of the stuff that I'm getting from people is like, I just don't know where to put my money. I'm afraid. Is this company the flavor of the day? You
But
know,
that's when everybody's afraid that that's when you come into the market, and it's always it's a simple motto: buy low, sell high.
it's a simple
But
rule.
it's funny that nobody applies it, even I. It's just psychological. It's a human nature that when things are doom and gloomy, you just pull back.
Yeah.
But that's when you make I shouldn't say the word killings, but that's when you make the killings. Just
Yes.
getting back to a little bit more specific of Killian and his presentation on Brunswick, obviously right now the focus is on the Mirage project and the Elrond project, which they're drilling. That's a 50% partnership with Midland Exploration.
Yes.
But I was just going to highlight, and Killian was very good at that, is just, the James Bay is emerging as a very prominent lithium, emerging lithium mining district potentially. What I found interesting in terms of the conversations was, you know, it has a relatively good infrastructure, but there is this notion that, you know, spodumene is an industrial minerals. And so the distance to good infrastructure is very important. And as you know, here in Quebec, there's North American Lithium that has its operations near Lamotte, the southern part of the Abitibi, but the James Bay is quite far away. And so there's going to have to be eventually, for the ones who are going to go ahead, talking about Patriot probably, and I think, the big players like BHP, Rio Tinto will probably have their eyes set on the James Bay.
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure.
they'll,
Yeah.
they'll have to be they'll have to be something that will have to be done in terms of infrastructure. It can be a railway line up to Radisson. I asked a question yesterday about, would you maybe foresee something to use the James Bay, and I'm saying James Bay in the sense of the watershed, and the Hudson Bay, where you could actually have a port and ship the things around northern Quebec and then come back down to the St. Lawrence Seaway. And then you have all the eastern sort of the eastern seaboard, if you want, as access. And I'm mentioning it because I remember when iron ore, it was something that I had looked at, particularly because you had all the Labrador trough that we bring down by railway to Sept-Îles, but from Sept-Îles it's put on the boats, maybe Sept-Îles or Baie-Comeau, it's put on the boat,
Yeah.
and then it's shipped, into the St. Lawrence Seaway into the Great Lakes.
Yes.
But there are some smaller iron projects on the western part of the James Bay, and it was Poste de la Baleine, Great Whale, or Kujarapik in the Inuit name,
Yes.
where there was plans of maybe eventually building a deep water port there, and then you could ship that. And with the changes of the climate, as you know, the Northwest Passage I think is less ice constricted. So
Oh yeah.
there's possibilities to be able to ship from the center of Canada,
Yes.
Hudson Bay, to Europe or to central Quebec.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's something that I think eventually, hopefully, the Quebec government with the Plan Nord will look at that. Obviously, I think maybe the first one would be the railway, but we'll definitely need that sort of road infrastructure because, you have the spodumene, you concentrate to 6%, but then you have to ship that. And you have to ship that to a refinery somewhere to make either the carbonate or the hydroxide lithium. And right now, that's more into southern Quebec. Maybe foresee something being done more towards Matagami or Shabumu or even Radisson. But it's all stuff that, yes, we did have sort of, or that Killian did sort of open up in terms of just giving us some perspective in terms of James Bay is very well endowed. You've got hydroelectric power, you've got some relatively security with the First Nations, but there's missing a little bit of pieces that for the long term development of this
Yeah.
aspect of Quebec being a really dominant lithium producer, that will have to be taken
Yeah.
care of.
What I like about the BRW setup is that they try to stay within like 40 something 50 kilometers to a main road. And I
Yep.
think that that is very important because it touches up upon what you're saying, because that's not too far. So if you start having big deposits that are within like an hour ride, let's just say 60 kilometers, 50 kilometers, whatever, this is
Well, I think
very.
the threshold is 50 kilometers, which is
Yep,
fair enough.
that's
When they do their
just
screening,
threshold.
their initial
Yeah,
screening, you
great.
as anything else, you can't spread yourself all over the world because if not, you
No,
would explore it all over.
yeah,
But they really applied in their acumen to say, hey, look, we restrain ourselves to this sort of
yeah,
uh,
it's great.
and that's the
It's a
criteria.
absolutely, it's a great plan. And then naturally, Quebec is investing a lot of money within the industry. When you're looking at, for the EV battery storage, because not just EVs alone, right? So just battery energy, battery storage. We're heading into this world of digitization. The world will change, maybe in
Yeah.
20 years, 30 years, it will not look the same at all. I think that we're in a new type of revolution, digital, artificial intelligence, all this kind of stuff. And Quebec sees this all coming. The money, the billions from the Quebec government, they're investing it all in this industry that has a annual compounded annual growth rate, which is positive. So why would you take lithium from anywhere else in the world if Quebec is already planning all of this money in here? Why wouldn't you want to get it locally to just
Well,
drive it right to the refineries?
well, hopefully, but that's where my critique is that I think they're spending 10 billion on the battery plants, so at the end of the supply chain. But you've got to make sure that the beginning of the supply chain is there. And my fear is effectively there's maybe too much things skewed towards the end and no really thought about the beginning. Now, I think the preconceived idea is that the beginning, well, Quebec does have a good infrastructure with the Quebec Inc., maybe the Kaiser Depot, maybe CEDEX,
Yes.
maybe the SDBG. We do have that famous Quebec Inc., and so we do have help in that regards and Investissement Quebec also. But as I said just earlier on about the infrastructure, there's going to have to be a little bit of fine tweaking and also considerable investment at the beginning if you want to assure yourself that you're able to supply these power plants. Because if not, what's going to happen is that, and this is my fear, is that
Yes.
these power plants are going to have feed, and it might Quebec's mineral potential might not be ready for the fact that we have to go through the BAP, the environmental process. The infrastructure is not there yet per se, and so there's going to be a lot of adjustments that hopefully the ones who are governing us will be able to foresee and put their peons at the right moment at the right place.
Well, I hope that they are I really hope that they do have those planners there, making sure of it. Because if they, I mean, not if, but because they are putting in that much money, because they are looking towards the future. I mean, Quebec has the potential right now to put themselves in a position. I mean, we have great water source here for hydroelectricity. We can really come out as a key player
For
in
sure, Albert, when you put the
Canada.
checklist and
Yeah,
you start picking the
yeah,
box, Quebec is very well positioned, that's for sure.
oh
And
yeah,
you just mentioned the hydroelectricity. I mentioned previously about, with La Paix des Braves, I think, with
yes,
the Free First Nations, there's agreements. I think this is being replicated in other parts of Quebec, so much the better. I think
yes,
there's respect for both parties. I think there is this whole element about being aware of the environment, nature, but I think everything is being done to be very uh, correct in that regards.
yes.
But like I say, in terms of the Plan Nord, I have a little bit of a deception where there's missing a little bit of proactivity to be able to build the proper infrastructure for in the 5 to 10 year timeline that we're able to supply where they're now spending $10 billion on the battery manufacturing.
Well, you just made a light go off in my head. And that light is, before we wrap up, is maybe we should get someone from the Quebec government on the show and that you and I start talking to them.
I mean to foresee. I mean, I have to be careful because I'm a little bit sometimes a little bit will nudge shoulders with certain aspects. But yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I think ultimately they want for the better good, but sometimes there's a little bit of fine tweaking that is necessary.
Absolutely.
But to summarize yesterday's breakfast meeting, it was
Yes.
very interesting, was excellent. Like I said, there was 2 segments. I think Killian did a very good tapestry of what's going on in terms of the lithium industry. But I just want to highlight the fact that
Yeah.
I think there's a future for obviously for lithium, but I want to insist
Yes.
on the fact that it's going to be quality and quantity. I
Yes.
think the James Bay is well positioned, very well positioned. Obviously, it's always case by case because every deposit is different. As you know, I mean, this is what I sort of learned now is that when you talked about pegmatites, but also focus on the wall rock, focus on what exactly you're going to be putting on the concentrator because that all plays out there. But I think Brunswick is very well positioned with its portfolio projects. And I insist on the word portfolio because for me, an exploration company, if you want to be able to succeed, you just can't dance on one foot. It's
No.
important to have a flagship,
Yes.
but I think a testament of a very good company is able to dance on several toes if you want. And I think in that regards, Brunswick is very well positioned. And I said earlier on, I mean, they're the leader of the parade. And so I just would have a high expectation that they'll be able to repeat, continue, and create success.
Well, you know what? Thank you so much, Eric, for being on the show.
It was a
Uh,
pleasure.
Definitely a high note to say, like, I'd like to have you back here in the future again and
Well,
talk about.
Albert, I think we've mentioned that it would be very good for us to go on site. I think once the snows have subsided, and hopefully we won't have any forest fires this summer. I am a little bit, we'll have to see how things pan out, but hopefully we'll be able to see each other on a site visit like we did last fall in New
uh,
Brunswick.
yes, that was
Because
great.
that's where you really get the sense of what's going on and
Oh, maybe we should
fun to
talk to
mingle with
Killian about
management.
that. Maybe get out there for sure. We would have a great time out there, and I'd love to be able to do that. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Thank you so much, Eric, for being on the show. Definitely something to talk to Killian about.
All
Have a
right.
great day.
Pleasure. Take care,
See you
everybody.
soon. Bye.
Bye bye.
Between Plays, it's the journey and what you do between where you are and where you want to be. Research, prepare, plan, and execute your strategy. Do your DD and stay strong in visualizing and achieving your goals. Our strategy is unique since 2020. An original concept imitated, never duplicated. Real conversations with media influencers, educational and expert speakers, analysts, and consultants. Between Plays, bridging the gap between companies and investors.